Welcome to the Out There Network. My name is Kate Elizabeth, and I'd like to introduce you all to Sacha Stone. Sacha is the founder of Humanitad, New Earth Project, and the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. He's a frontline activist, a filmmaker, publisher, and speaker. And we had a brief chat the other day, didn't we, about healthy boundaries when we were talking about how they've led us to where we are now. Is that a good point for you to start on?
Sure. Well, you also remember that my caveat was that there's no boundaries are acceptable to me at all. Boundaries are the great danger, in my view. Setting boundaries, all they do is really underscore the trial of separation, which ultimately is what we're all seeking to recover ourselves from. So at what point do we recognize that letting go of linear ideas and moving more into the kind of quantum aspect of our supernature is exactly what each of us are desperately calling for in our lives? I mean, we're all crying in the wilderness since the day we're born. It's all about the trial of separation. So let's stop trying to impose boundaries and enclosures, and let's recognize the quantum nature of our true divine nature, and then meet on that playing field where we don't need boundaries, least of all healthy boundaries. I think the equation, Kate, is fear or love. Fear is in a state of constriction. Love is in a state of expansion. And I think we have to start to apply those very rudimentary mathematics to our own lives.
Do you feel that's going to be easier for some than others? Like, for example, Bob down the street, who may be so smothered feeling in all of these external boundaries that are happening in his life, and then he's following these rules that are set in place.
Well, Bob is paying attention to rules that he has permissioned and that he continues to permission. So again, Bob is not a victim of anything other than Bob. And when Bob owns that, then Bob recognizes that he has always had the power to change his circumstance and to embody and to manifest a higher outcome. But that takes consciousness in action. And in order to engage consciousness in action, Bob needs to befriend Bob. Bob needs to learn who Bob is and not dive into the pub to escape from his true nature, or not dive into cocaine or into any number of addictions that we find ourselves beset with as humans. It's about relationship with self, actualizing that relationship with oneself and absolving oneself, moving into that flame, so to speak, and then actualizing consciousness. And then, of course, being able to move out into the temporal realm, into the world, and decide how you want to shape this reality and impose your will in that sense onto this world, which absolutely is why we are here. When we let go of our monotheistic religious addictions, because that's also a false an addiction, and when we release ourselves from the strictures, the control of imposed morality and the social norms and the contract with governments, institutions, and so on, when we step away from all of that systemic bullshit and step into our own nature, look at ourselves in the mirror and go, hey, nice to see you in this world, having, navigated through billions of years and limitless galaxies. Nice to find you on planet Earth. How should we shape our reality from here? Or are we really going to continue to just shuffle along to the tune of some idiot government or institution or monotheistic religion that has laid down rules and laws 10,000 years ago, none of which have any bearing on us today? So obviously, you're going to get the fundamentalists in all religions shrieking at that notion. Let them shriek away. Let them shriek. The fact of the matter is, we are here divinely anointed, each one of us, in Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness or Krishna consciousness. And our absolute imperative is to discover relationship with self, engage that divine nature, go forth and manifest, embody and manifest the highest ideals, the highest expression, and paint on the canvas of life. That's why we're here. We're not here to do wage slavery, pay taxes to fictions masquerading as governments, and then die on cue from some godless disease invariably caused by the poisoning of our biosphere. And I'll leave you with that thought as we enter into a discussion on the corona bullshit.
You're on lockdown in Bali now, I believe.
Well, relatively. I mean, we're an island with a very radical warrior peoples here who don't really give a toss about central governments and their bullshit rules. Policemen don't come here and interfere too much with the locals, or they beat the policeman with a stick. So there's a jungle, in a sense, jungle logic going on here, and it's a beautiful thing. So no, there's no lockdown in the rice fields. People are moving around and doing their thing, but the government decree is that everyone needs to self-isolate for 14 days. Of course, they're just clicking their heels to the central government, who's clicking its heels to central command, coming from the UN and NATO and so on.
And how do you feel during all this pandemonium that's happening?
I feel that it's the most perfectly appointed intake of breath at the planetary level, where at the psycho-civilizational level we are all being required to take an inward breath and to reflect. And you know, we just yesterday had the high priest of Bali came here with I think 8 of the other priests to conduct a ceremony here. And we were also filming a Bali message to the world, which will be released probably tomorrow. But Bali is about to go into a ceremony, a day of silence called Nyepi on Wednesday. And that's something which happens in the Balinese 13-month calendar every year, where the whole island goes into silence for 24 hours. And in that state of reflection and meditation or yoga or darkness, because there's no lights and no airport and no radio stations and no traffic, no one goes out onto the streets, everyone remains indoors, more or less in darkness, and reflects. And you forgive yourself and you forgive others. And the following day you go and ask for that forgiveness from your neighbors or from whoever you want to get that absolution from. But that's something written into the gestalt of these peoples here, and it's a profoundly intelligent thing, because every year they allow their group ego to express itself. They have the Oga Oga ceremony. They build monsters in all the villages and parade the monsters around on big trellises, and then they burn them at midnight and then go into 24 hours of silence and reflection. Beautiful thing. And we think here in Bali that this is kind of what's being enforced on the rest of the world right now. It's a day of silence. Maybe it's a 10-day. Maybe it's 2 weeks. Maybe it's 2 months. Either way, we could speak at great length about what is actually happening in the basement. And to ask me the question, what do I feel? I feel ecstatic by what is flowing right now.
There is a beautiful vibration happening, I feel.
Yes.
It's healing in its own way. Everything's stopped. There's not that feeling of pressure and rushing and work. And it makes you realize, actually, wow, what was everybody living for? Living to earn money to buy those fancy heels or to, this, that and the other. And it's like, it's all just stopped. Everybody's got to stay and reconnect with themselves. And do you feel maybe whilst they're in that process of staying in, confined, a lot of people are putting their board out of their brains and all of this and all of that. Do you feel it's kind of hard for them to grasp that feeling of reconnecting after being so controlled for so long?
Again, it comes down to the equation of fear or love, and I hate to be that reductivist and speak in those terms, but it really comes down to that. If you are foundationally a fearful person and your natural reflex is a fearful one and a constricted one, then you're naturally going to be falling into a default position right now where you feel scared out of your wits about what's going on, and you're naturally going to attune to the ideas out there like, oh, New World Order is being implemented and this is planetary lockdown and they're coming for us, and the Gestapo are knocking on the door. You can go into that space and you can project your plasma, your ideas into the field in that way, and you can have a real shitty time in the next day, 10 days, 2 months, whatever it's going to be. Or conversely, you recognize that all is as it should be at any given time. The geometry of now is perfect. Not that you cannot change it, you can, but you can only change the outcome with actualized consciousness. So why not use this time to move into that bliss state? and recognize that this is just another phenomenon that we are blessed to be living through. And yes, it's the collapse of our civilizational wheel. Absolutely, about fucking time, excuse me. We need to collapse the mutant Luciferian false light addiction, this adherence to, again, false aspects of the religious ideologies. This is all idolatry. That's not religion. Shuffling on and banging your head against the floor and, waving crucifixes around and endless mantras. Whether you're New Age or Mormon or Adventist or Christian or Islamic, we have been indentured increasingly into the false light aspect of monotheistic religions. That is idolatry. It's the very thing that the Prophet Muhammad, God rest him, he was speaking against in his life. It's the very thing that the Master Jesus was speaking against in his life. Idolatry. Crush the idols. This is a time for us to do the same thing, to clear out the Kaaba, to absolutely clear out the idolatry aspect of how we engage faith and worship. And if we don't have the courage to do that, then let us perish. Let us perish. Yes. Because we are absolutely dancing around a golden calf, the calf of Baal. This is a planet locked in ritual sacrifice of innocence. This is a planet underpinned by war, disease, and poverty that each one of us, goodly Christians and Muslims and Hindus, have allowed and permissioned in our lives, in our generations. Shame on us. But let us now use this time to reflect and to break that bone and reset it, and do it with absolute courage, absolute conviction, which is to say, to engage the truest atom seed of our nature, which is joy, ecstatic, orgasmic. Don't forget, each one of us was born through orgasm. There is nothing wrong with this. To re-engage the bliss peak wave of our supernature is what we should be doing, each one of us, especially at this time. It's a choice. Move into fear reflexivity and perish to that imagining, or move into the other and start to manifest the outcome. How about envisioning what is taking place is the most bold and beautiful reset. We could have been going through Armageddon, the bloody type. We're going through a bloodless Armageddon, as my friend Benjamin Fulford refers to it as. That's a blessing. It means that there is a soft landing underway, and we should embrace and engage that soft landing with courage in our hearts, not by quivering behind the sofa, and not by proliferating the pornography of fear through false memes that we attune to because we have unresolved aspects in our own dark hearts. And then we want to throw that shit back out into the worldwide social media platforms. No. We are the progenitors of all that we are. We are the progenitors of all that will ever be. So let's just own that space now and manifest a beautiful outcome. But the more practical aspect of what's going on is beautiful. Why in Salt Lake City are they feeling tremors and earthquakes? They're taking out deep underground military bases. There are trillions of dollars worth of black operations funded exercises by these so-called Illuminati or the Sabbateans, the Babylonian priests, these deviants who've been manipulating humans through dream spell and spell binding and manipulating markets, sequestering the gold and the technologies. My God, this is a beautiful awakening from all of that.
Yes. Can you elaborate a little more on the deep state detox? Have you covered some of that already, do you feel?
What is palpably clear is that creating such an innocuous, ridiculous, absurd cover story, smokescreen about the coronavirus being the great threat. Come now. Okay, if anyone wants to pay attention, I'll give a very simple lesson in virology and biology. Okay, coronavirus happens all the time. It's always been with us. Every single year, between 10 and 17% of human beings who suffer from flu are suffering from the spectrum of the coronavirus. There are about 100-odd viruses that mutate constantly, that become the household flu variously or the common cold. And corona happens to be between 10 to 17% of those mutating viruses happen to fall within the corona spectrum. So every year people are dying of corona. Every year people are afflicted from corona. And every year most people are recovering from corona. Corona is no worse, more or less, than the average household flu. Was this particular strain weaponized? There's a very healthy argument that it was. Has that weaponization been counter-couped, been co-opted and commandeered by so-called white hats? Almost certainly, absolutely. Right now, are millions of people dropping dead from corona? No, that's a goddamn lie. They are not. China has completely recovered, no new cases of corona. Remember, a few short weeks ago, the hoo-ha was all about China. Right now, you're talking about Milan, you're talking about Qom in Iran, and you're talking about Wuhan in China. Those are the three principal pandemic alert centers. They also happen to all correspond to, historically, to centers of Christianity. The genesis of Christianity in Iran and in Italy and in China occurred more or less in those regions. Is this some kind of a galactic war playing out in the temporal realm? A war against from the Aryans and the... Possibly, yes. We could talk about that and have a great conversation. None of it's relevant. All of these storylines and probabilities and possibilities are existing as entangled timelines in a holographic field of reality. The fact and the point is, where are you in this right now? Where do you stand? What is the summoning within? What are you divining within this tribulation as the quintessence of your soul, of who you be, of who you are, the great I am? That is the only thing that matters. So, yes, we could have conversations about genetic warfare. Yes, about weaponization of the biosphere. Yes, about deep state counter-coup measures being taken on a 5D chess game. We could talk about all of those things. But to be blunt with you, in my view, all of these are distractions from the true question, which is, who are you in this? Are you defining your relationship with yourself? And are you thereby engaging your true nature, your super nature, and being able to then determine and define the outcome for you and for your family, for your peoples? That's the key question, and I'm going to keep coming back to that.
One would hope most people are. I hope they are, and I hope they do in these times.
I have every faith in that. Yeah.
And it does feel kind of biblical.
It is biblical, and God loved the good book, because the good book, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, describes the passage of tribulation. Whether that is also a looking glass, a phenomenon, the Bible, present, past, perpendicular, who cares, who knows? Again, we're living in a quantum field of reality, and if you don't wake up to that, you are going to crack like a nut, because we are all of us being summoned and called into our higher capacitance. We're all of us having to heighten our expression and our capacity through our psionic center in the gut to be able to start to reconvene our true nature, our true intelligence, which is gut intelligence, heart intelligence, if you like, and withdraw from the materialistic world that we've managed to proliferate so well. All we've done is recreated Atlantis here, and Atlantis is falling in about bloody time.
Do you feel, Sacha, that this has been coming on for years, or is it suddenly, this needs to happen now, the planet, the enlightened beings can't take it anymore?
Well,
or has this been coming on for
wacky hippies like me have been talking about this stuff for an awful long time, and writing 10, 12, 15 years ago, writing white papers and articles and arguing that this is the game we were setting ourselves up for. Our unconscious civilization was absolutely begging for this kind of event horizon to manifest. What I find a blessing is that it could have been so much worse. We could have been moving into an auto-destruct that was a hard landing, with thermonuclear missiles going off and monstrous seismic cataclysmic activities taking place, and floods and earthquakes. And we're having all of those tremors in any event. We're having a lot of seismic activity, but it's very gentle. I mean, I've had 2 earthquakes, earth tremors this week. We had a volcano go off fairly recently here, and we were all locked down under ash. We're in the ring of fire here. I'm delighted to be positioned in the cradle of the womb of the planet here. And I'm certainly not afraid of what's going on. We're having the most aberrant weather patterns imaginable with the monsoons here. And again, it's welcomed. This is change. Change is afoot and very, very needful. Yes, the geometry is perfect. We have been civilizationally setting ourselves up for a fall. The fall is occurring. And if you ask me, by the grace of the living God, we are witnessing the softest landing imaginable. It's beautiful.
Are you following any of the government rules with the?
Oh, of course not.
The 2 meter. Is it 2 meter? 2 meter social distancing
bullshit. But just tell the government to zip. Government is a criminal enterprise. No, I've enmatized the crimes of governments for over 20 years. The government does not tell a corporate fiction called a government does not have any jurisdiction to tell a living soul what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. When you get that and you step into sovereignty and you disengage or disentangle yourself from the wiles and the fancies of the fiction of government, then you recognize that you don't need to fall in line with these bullshit protocols. But then I'm not living in a city grid by design. I came here years ago to start to define and build out the New Earth Haven was envisioned many, many years ago as the antidote to that clusterfuck of the matrix, so to speak, that people are trapped in cityscapes. And I empathize and I sympathize. And I don't think it's going to turn into anything like the gulags of Poland. I don't think it's going to be military giving out rations for very long. That's certainly happening in some parts and will needfully happen. I hope, Kate, that what happens out of this, I really hope that living souls all around the world recognize the cancer of cities and start to relocate back to the agrarian community lifestyle. Go back to reconfigure relationship with land and with the oceans, with the mountains, with the forests, with the sea. That's where we should be. We have been falsely pulled into city clusters. That is the Babylonian bad dream or wet dream. Okay, to fracture us and break us up as a one peoples and then conglomerate us all and aggregate us all into cities and to harvest our life force out of those cities. And all our time and motion, our living light, our life force is being harvested through the cities. When we go back to the land and reconfigure relationship with land, then we will see a complete dissolution of the false light matrix that we've been living through.
Back to farming and back to the simple things in life.
I don't know that many of us are going to want to farm, but yes, I take your point. And the point being, there are farmers out there, but each of us ought to just get back to relationship with nature. That's the point. We've allowed ourselves to be sucked away from the agrarian community model, which was a foundationally healthy model, the fractality of nature all around us, the codes of nature streaming through our feet and through the crowns of our head. Engaging that space, we've allowed ourselves systemically over the last, certainly the last couple of 100 years, but I would say in the last 50, 60, 70 years, essentially since the Second World War, imposed and fully weaponized scarcity economics. Once scarcity economics was imposed as the absolute model on this world, and that we had to listen to government, and government would save us from the enemy. Of course, they'd created the goddamn enemy in the first place, but all of that mythos was dreamt up. And we were sucked then increasingly into cities away from the land. And that's what we've got now. We've got billions and billions of hectares of green field out there. No one living on the land. Monoculture, artificialized monocultural farming, using heavy dependent on heavy toxins, which of course go straight into our bloodstream and poison us and give us cancers. So all of that feedback is not working. Relationship with land is where we go back, still ourselves, listen to the soil. And whatever happens, happens. There's no given model. We've got to simply recognize the falsity of living inside city constructs and pegging our time and our motion into wage slavery. That's the point I'm making here. Because it's a choice to do that. We say, we don't have a choice. How else are we going to make a living? Well, go and find out. Go to Libya, go to Angola, go to Myanmar, go and find a life, find some beautiful space to engage your reality. We don't have to follow these idiot rules and regulations and statutes and codes and ordinances that are dreamt up by technocrats who are soulless armies of soulless entities wearing costumes.
Yeah, and applying the rubber soles to our feet to make us more disconnected to the earth that we most need.
Yes, all of that. Sunglasses, skin cream, sunscreen, all of these things are artificial. The shampoo we put in our hair, the toothpaste we're using, the fluoridization and calcification of our pineal gland through fluoride is probably the single biggest killer in the world, but let's not look at that. Yeah. And the fact that that's been put into water supplies all around the world subsequent to the Second World War. So all of these heinous crimes conducted by government, unconscious government, I have to say, because most people are trapped in a bad system, working in governments and working in, state departments and what have you. We know that. But the point is, it's all choices, and we're choosing to allow our lives to be indentured into wage slavery, where we abnegate our conscience and our consciousness, which is our sovereignty, which is to abnegate our Christ flame for the love of God. Yeah. And then we all shuffle off to church on Sunday, or, flip through the good book and pretend that we're Christians, pretend that we're Muslims by banging our head on the floor and reading the Quran relentlessly. Bullshit to all of that idolatry. Real time out now. Real time for us to engage relationship with self and then with our Creator.
When you talked before about, what's happening in the deep reset, what is your hope and vision for that reset? What does that look like to you, that reset? I think you hit on a few points of how it looks.
Sure, it looks like exactly what we're witnessing now. Yeah. But when on the other side of this passage that we're moving through, this kind of involuntary civilizational death and rebirth, what does the regenesis look like? It looks like the absolution of debt. It looks like everything from student loans to credit cards, and that's already underway, incidentally. It looks like the redemption of the legacy treaties, the legacy contracts, conventions, and compacts that were signed by the Vatican complex, the Jesuits, essentially 200 years ago, 300 years ago, everywhere from the Philippines to the Amazon basin. All of the hereditary peoples, First Nation peoples of the world, red skin, yellow skin, black skin, and brown skin, were essentially hoodwinked by the Vatican complex into signing treaties, obviously at the end of a bayonet or a cannon. But those hereditary treaties that were signed where they gave up their land, gave up their gold, have never been honored. So it was the plunder of the rest of the world that was essentially the collateral behind the false light economy that we've been living with for the last couple of 100 years. And all of that requires redemption, because you have to go back to the compact, the treaty, and the legacy treaty, the hereditary treaty, and you have to some great extent, honor as much of it as you can, and you have to beg for forgiveness, for absolution or redemption. That has to take place, because there'll never be peace in the world until that's honored. It's not just the living souls who are standing sentinel there. It's the dead souls. It's the ancestors of all of these people. Billions and billions of souls have died to the song of empire and to the tune of the battle drum, and that needs redemption as well. We're talking about the hyperdimensional physics, the lower astral or the spiritual dimension of what's going on in the temporal world. They're all interconnected, and we have to honor the spirit as well of these engagements, which we have dishonored. And our taxes have, especially the white man's poison, the taxes that we've paid in the Western world, is essentially also been not just offering ourselves up for sacrifice on that false wheel, but has also been perpetrating those historical crimes. At what point do we stop? This is the point at which we stop.
I heard you mention this before. It's the business taxes you understand about. We pay our business taxes. We all do. It's the personal income tax.
Yeah, that just goes back to the medieval days, probably even before. I'm not an expert on this. There are other people out there who are much better pundits than me. But you go back to the times when we used to, put our bales of hay or our turnips onto a wheelbarrow and take it into the market square. Well, the market square became quite fetid and unattractive and unhealthy when too many people came to create this local barter and exchange forum in the markets. They started to become heavily, densely populated, and disease started breaking out, and it became necessary for the social contract to emerge there, where someone had to, dig the ditches and put in the latrines and the, fumigations or whatever, and begin to take care of the common parts and build an infrastructure that could contain a growing market. And so this is where tithes began, in a sense. And merchants had to pay tax. So they'd come and they'd sell their turnips and then give 1 groat tax per month or whatever it was. And that was an acceptable convention, very acceptable. That was paying into the common weal, into the common good. Now, where it became a grotesque, criminal, and lawless offense against the living souls of the land was when King John and these putrid popes and kings of old themselves began to see that tithes from the serfs could create a war chest and help them protect and defend. So they started selling that mythos to people that, you've got to give your little groat or your gold piece so that we can, have a granary and keep grain back for a bad year or whatever. These arguments proliferated, and slowly but surely, living men and women of the living soil were indentured into this false notion that you have to pay into the common weal. So personal tax kind of evolved in that sense. Personal income tax evolved as this harvest of humanity concept. And that's all it's eventuated into, is all personal income tax pays for war, which it did back in the day as well, incidentally, in the medieval times, no different. But all merchant taxes are, in a sense, lawful. I mean, I think that they overreach themselves. I think the bureaucracies have vastly overreached themselves. And I think that the reset that's about to occur is going to qualify that overreach as well. So we're going to see a reset taking place at every level of commerce, I believe. When NAFTA was taken down by the Trump administration 3 years ago, that set the way for the United Nations itself to be taken down, which it needs to be. It needs to be absolutely dismantled. It's a criminal organization, and I'm a former Director General of the IGO sector at the UN. I'm in a somewhat qualified position to speak about that organization, and I would love to be dragged into a courtroom, incidentally, on this matter, and to palpably prove and demonstrate the high crimes, the treason against the true sovereign by the United Nations historically, despite the fact that its genesis was for the best will in the world, dreamt up and articulated by very great men and women who were co-opted from academia into writing the compact and to establishing the UN, and has become a behemoth, a criminal enterprise of epic proportion, which is the very thing that is ensuring the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, are the two horns of the devil. The Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, and the IMF is the bowel of Hades. It is the very thing that is ensuring war, disease, and poverty. And it's the World Trade Organization that enforces, in a sense, war, disease, and poverty. And the World Health Organization, don't even start me there.
You said briefly before, you mentioned about once the Cabal, or is it the Cabal you said?
Yeah,
once the Cabal are taken
Cabal,
out,
yes.
Under that umbrella, are they factored in with that umbrella of...
as I explained to my friend Robert David Steele, the former CIA analyst, a couple of days ago, we're dealing with inversion logic within a counter coup being played on a 5D chessboard. And you have to accept that that's what we're dealing with. The average human trapped in linear logic is not going to understand this game, so don't bother, and please don't bother to send me questions because I'm not going to answer them. But if you are prepared to sit in some grace and to get this inner focus and sense the vibral light, the sense of what's going on, and then apply your kind of logic, your highest rationale to these equations, you might just get it. It is very complicated. Not all kings and queens are rotten. Not all princes and popes are evil. Not all cardinals are blood-gurgling Satanists. I would argue that right now they probably are. That's my own idea. I can't imagine that there's any cardinal in the Vatican complex or any of the Opus Dei functionaries, these Jesuitical morons who simply follow blindly the dictates of that insane man Ignatius Loyola going back a couple of hundred years. I can't imagine that any one of those souls would be sitting in grace and be able to cross the threshold of the Vatican whilst holding the grace of God in their hearts. I can't see it myself. How is it possible? That effigy is responsible for so much bloodletting and degradation of humanity historically, going back to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. And all that the Vatican complex has countenanced is in the diabolical and Luciferian realm. That much is crystal clear to anyone with true focus. Thank God, truly thank God, that we are seeing the auto-destruct of the Roman Catholic Church. And I say it here about bloody time. But it's not just the Roman Catholic Church. Islam has been weaponized. Okay? Aspects of all of the primary monotheistic religions have been more or less weaponized. And this is the problem. Adherence to anything outside of one's inner light at this stage is essentially a willing walk into a labyrinth. Why would we do that to ourselves?
I've said to my husband, I felt very frustrated on this planet because I believe, I've known you for quite a few years, and I've gone through different stages, and I believe the longer I've been on this planet, the more I've not wanted to be on this planet. And I've gone through the frustrating moments, and I've had the very deep conversations with my parents or with my husband, saying, we've got to fight. I mean, why is everybody just going about their business day to day and they're off to work and stuff? And look at this, like 5G or whatever is happening. We need to fight this. But I guess the best advice is what you're saying. This is a big game that is being played, that even if people try to sift through the good from the bad, it's a game that can't be won in that sense, but it can be won if we connect with our inner flames. I've heard you talk in interviews before about Gladio, and the fifth column infiltrated into the Vatican, the banking system, the crown. Is that to do with the Cabal? Can you shed a little bit on Gladio?
Yes. Well, the Cabal in the first instance, when I refer to the Cabal, I'm talking about the Sabbatean, the Lurian Kabbalists. I'm talking about the most egregious aspect of the satanic influence in the world has snaked its way into our civilizational format, really through the devise of the Lurian Kabbalistic tradition. I'm not able to go into that here, but one ought to do some serious work and look it up, check it out, read about it. The Sabbateans are the saboteurs, and Gladio is a planetary network of standing saboteurs, a standing army of saboteurs and provocateurs, heavily financed since the Second World War, but largely aggregated more formally in the 1970s. And Gladio is a network of highly egregious and nefarious, and one imagines soulless humanoids who have been heavily financed through, by best accounts, $1 trillion black operations budgets. And they are essentially responsible for enacting diabolical events, false flags, school shootings, and all the rest of it. There are millions of ritual Satanists in the world. In America, probably anything up to 8 or 9% of the American population are more or less involved either loosely or directly with Luciferianism and Satanism, though that figure is actually quite a low figure, and comes to us from people who themselves grew up in satanic families and were part of these generational lines of Satanists, practicing Satanists, and how they've infiltrated the apparatus the infrastructures, the social infrastructure over generations is a very interesting study. I can't go into that here. I think you have to factor that Operation Gladio is probably cherry-picked from within that 8-9% demographic. At the very heart of it, the more diabolical aspects, artificial intelligence. We could talk about some of the more diabolical things that have been done subsequent to the Second World War in the eugenics area of focus. You're talking about creating artificializing humans and growing things in petri dishes and laboratories, heavily financed again. A lot of ugly stuff. Do we have clones? More than likely we do have clones. I'm not interested in that subject myself, but I'm absolutely certain in my own mind with what I already know. And what I know is what I know, is not what I conjecture. My foundation has been involved variously over the last 15 years in dealing with governments on alien technologies, out-of-place artifacts. On a handful of occasions, we've been called in, signed papers, non-disclosures, seen things, observed transdimensional technologies, and very, very odd stuff, which we were asked to help contribute our brain trust towards. So I know already about the hypercompartmentalization that goes on with governments who, many of them themselves haven't the faintest idea what's going on. They're just good mandarins in office, wondering what the hell's been dragged in by the army for them to look at. So there's a lot of weird stuff there that's covered up and closed, sequestered, locked away. More or less, the intelligence agencies will move in very quickly, like the weaponized CIA in the past, and they will lock down and control that piece of information or that alien technology or that crashed UFO or whatever it is, and it'll be buried, and they'll bring in the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institute and entities like that to participate in some of the sequestering. But the point is, Gladio is a standing army of saboteurs connected to the Sabbatean tradition, the infiltration of humanity by engineered device, essentially springing through the apparatus of the black papacy, or the Jesuitical aspect of the black papacy. And underpinning them are trillion-dollar black operations budgets, which themselves are connected to human trafficking, ritual sacrifice of innocence, gold, plunder and sequestration of gold, opium trade, illegal drug trade, and of course the sheer mafia that takes place in stock markets nowadays. So we're also talking about pharmaceutical products, trillions of dollars worth of pharmaceutical products, which themselves are utterly lawless and illicit, and agrochemical industries as well, and their multi-trillion-dollar toxification of the planet. So whether you're talking about agrochemical industries, pharmaceutical industries, that's the healthy side of the coin apparently, and the street drugs are the unhealthy side of the coin. I don't think so. Flip that on its head and you get halfway closer to the truth. But the point is, those enterprises are all variously controlled and connected to the financing of the hub within Operation Gladio. Operation Gladio is, from as I understand it, the standing army that goes and does the dirty shit, the wet works, the nasty stuff.
And you mentioned school shootings, for example, before as one of the things, many things happening. So do you feel that is all shock tactics to dumb us down more, in a sense, by shocking us and suck us in more to this shock of what's happening around us? I think
you should probably factor the positive aspect of this. That is, why are people being kept off the streets right now? Why is the smoke screen being permissioned by the White Hats, by the Earth Alliance, to push people into their homes and keep them off the streets and out of schools and so on? Precisely to avoid, in my view, these false flags and these school shootings and the kind of things that the Sabbateans always do when they're losing the card game. They always pull the stuff out, whether it's a 9/11 or it's a 7/7 or it's a Napoleonic War or it's whatever it is. All of the stuff that we've seen is invariably been engineered by the Sabbatean agenda. Wars never just happened. Back in the day, if there was a feudal dispute, it would be a little battle, a bunch of men on a battleground, maybe you lose half a dozen guys. That's it, game over, dispute settled. War was a whole different game. That was to do with social engineering, dream spelling, harvest of humanity, sequestering of the gold, financing of both sides of the equation by an agenda that sat in the middle and became the bank, which whoever won, the bank prevailed. And who controls the bank? What is the bank? The bank holds money. What is money? It's a totem. What does the totem represent? The totem represents the harvest of humanity. The time and the motion of living souls is what's behind money. This is harvest. Go back to the good book, people.
And then obviously the 5G's come into play recently, or has that been going on a while now?
Well,
and how does that make you
been
feel?
going on an awful long time, not 5G, but why did Spanish flu break out in 1918? That's because telegraphy was launched. Radio waves were going all over the place, and telegraphy was launched, I think, the year before. And so you had this proliferation of mutant radiation, mutant electromagnetic frequencies or electro frequencies were proliferating the Earth and settling into the biome. And the human response, the response of living systems at the time, was to detox. So the viruses that emerged were basically an excretion from the cells. That's all a virus is in its truest nature. It's an excretion from the living cell. It's a poison that's being detoxed and repelled from living systems. It's not something that self-exists out there flying through the space. Okay, viruses occur and mutate, manifest as an excretion of the cellular matrix of living systems. That happened in 1918. And then in the Second World War, similarly, it happened. When radar was introduced, we had huge influenzas culling millions and millions of people around the world. These strange viruses emerged. No, it was the human biome, the microbial flora and fauna in the humans and in all living systems, which was responding to the threat of the electrical charges and the radiation coming at them. And because we were being poisoned by these electrochemical mutations, we were excreting them. And that was diagnosed as being a virus, and which killed many people. But our understanding of what it is has always been very skewed. And now again, we've got a proliferation of 20,000 plus satellites sending again a new bandwidth, a new spectrum of weaponized frequencies at all living systems, and we are responding. So yes, the coronavirus may well be attributed in part to that phenomenon, if indeed it can be proven, and I'm not sure that it can, but if indeed it can be proven that the coronavirus is any more on radar than the common flu last year and the year before. I'm not convinced of the arguments yet. But the point I'm making is that any virus and pandemic is going to be the response of the living systems at the cellular level when they excrete the toxins that are penetrating them at the subtle level. And that is what the virus is.
Yes. Do you think that all of this that's been going on, like for thousands of years, do you think that certain people that you've described, some of the people that you've described, could have been infiltrated with any extraterrestrial intelligence?
Of course, you and I, for a start. So let's just be sensible about this. Blood is a fractal antenna. The blood coursing through our veins. In my case, a bit more Aryan blood. In someone else's case, a bit more Syrian blood or Orion blood or Andromedan blood or whatever, Arcturian, Draco-reptilian. It doesn't matter. We are alien hybrids in that sense, humans, but I would suggest that we are the ones who are assimilating them, not the other way around. Okay? It is us. It is the living light in Homo Sapien Sapien, the true Christ flame, that is in Gaia, in the womb of Gaia, that issues through the Homo Sapien Sapien. We are the great beacon of light in this void. And we are the ones who for millions of years have drawn the hyperdimensional, subdimensional, ultradimensional entities and temporal 3D entities into this realm. We are the ones who have magnetized them into this space because we are the quanta that offers absolution, redemption, to transmute them into their higher expression. And God knows we are the highest expression in this particular aspect of the universe. So this is why angels kneel before humans, because each one of us are doing divine work by simply being alive.
Yes, I believe that. And as long as we keep resonating that positivity and vibrating it out there, it's going to be a wonderful thing.
Sure.
After all this has happened, Sacha, what's your vision of the world we all want to be in?
If I could answer the question, I'd just pick up my computer and walk you through the New Earth Haven, and you can see what we've already created. I'm living it here. We're living it here.
It's beautiful where you are. We've seen it. We've looked on the website of the New Earth Haven, and it's like something out of Star Trek. If you ever watched Star Trek, the Starfleet and the world that they went to, it's beautiful.
But the point is that I'm not trying to be a smartass at all. And I do deeply appreciate and deeply empathize with the planetary mood, the gestalt, with the fear and the phobia and the neurosis, the anxiety, the reflexivity. I get it. I truly get it. But I get far more than that. I get the fact that is the great illusion, that is the detoxing of our spirit that we're feeling, fear. And we simply need to fully step into that inner light and close our eyes and imagine our highest dream, our highest envisioning, our highest imagining. The human being is a living capacitor of divine vibral light. We are able to draw that divine light into our centers. We're able to imagine, and through that imagining, we're able to then project plasma, life force into the field and make things. Build things, do things. Let's make them and build them and do them in grace and in goodness, using right action and pure truth. And then that new earth, that paradise, that heaven on earth is what we are the ones who are meant to anchor the patterns of perfection to this earth, not wait to be saved and taken to some different dimensional state. Our truest function is to manifest heaven on this perfect earth. So let's get on with that task in hand. And whatever happens on the other side of death, if indeed death is any more part of the equation in the near future, I'm not sure that it will be. I'm certainly myself absolutely convinced of the luminescence of human DNA once it becomes fully actualized. I've seen things with my own eyes. I've experienced things, both in the star body and in the physical body, that have beyond convinced me of what I'm saying here. I'm not sure that mortality is going to be much a part of the equation for much longer. I think we're entering now into the early stages of the ascension spiral, so to speak. Forgive me, I've got to tell my dog to shut up.
That's beautiful. What did you say?
I said shut the f*** up to my two poodles and to my little kitty bear. Look, they're divine, but they've decided to have to wage war on the back there. Point being, Kate, that this is the perfect time for us to imagine and envision and embody. And once we can do that properly, the manifestation becomes 1, 2, 3, ABC. And we've done it here at New Earth, not without trials and tribulations, not without huge difficulties. And we're in no state of perfection here. But we are a living testament to the fact that many good people can enjoin a unified vision connected to right action and pure truth and the elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness, and make something actually happen that carries a flame. And we're living it right now.
Somebody only said to me the other day that when, I've had these questions for many years and I've described the place that I want to be on this planet, and I've always, in my words, said things like, I can't believe we're born onto an earth where we're following a government and bowing to a queen and this, that, and the other. And then when they saw your project there, the New Earth project, that they said that's the world you've always wanted to be in. I mean, it's wonderful what you're doing.
The idea of the New Earth project is as faulty as it is worthy, and it's as much of a fail as it is a success. But I'm interested in the aspect of it which is a success, which is the embodiment and the manifestation. And again, the elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness. And I cannot overestimate the importance of that. Because when we recognize that time is not money, that was the lie. Time is art. Time is our capacity to dream, imagine, and paint on the canvas of life. When we get that equation, and we then become repulsed by how we have permissioned our lives to be indentured into the false light, into enslavement. We step away from that. That's the turning point. That's the beautiful stuff. Then it all starts happening from there. So this is the perfect time for the civilizational turning point.
And may many people who are watching this start to feel that and generate that. I pray that. And I hope you keep on shining such a beautiful torch that you are shining, Sacha. And may we arise as the Homo Sapiens that we are.
Homo Sapiens Galactica, Homo Sapiens Universalis. Absolutely. Thank you, Kate.